The house felt different when I walked through the front door that Tuesday night. Not physically different. Vara had always kept our place spotless, every throw pillow positioned with military precision. But something in the air had shifted, like the moment before a thunderstorm when your skin starts to tingle. I'm Porter Kellor, and I've spent 15 years reading situations for a living. First in the Army, now as a security consultant for high-end corporate clients. When something's off, I notice. When someone's lying, I can smell it from 3 rooms away. Vara was in the kitchen, her back to me, stirring something that smelled like the expensive Thai takeout from downtown. She wore her navy business suit, the one that cost more than my first car, but her hair was slightly mussed. Not boardroom mussed, bedroom mussed. "You're late," I said, dropping my keys on the granite counter. She didn't turn around. Meeting ran long. You know how Hayes gets when he's on a roll with the quarterly projections. Hayes Rellin, her boss at the tech firm where she'd been climbing the corporate ladder for 3 years, 40-something, divorced twice, drove a Tesla that cost more than most people's houses. The kind of man who wore $1,000 suits and treated everyone around him like they were there for his entertainment. "Must have been some meeting," I said, watching her shoulders tense. "Your lipstick's completely gone." I ate during the presentation, still not turning around. You know I can't focus when I'm hungry. I walked closer, close enough to catch the scent that wasn't her usual perfume. Something heavier, more masculine. Something that definitely wasn't from any meeting room unless Hayes had started wearing cologne that cost more per ounce than vintage whiskey. "Shower's running upstairs," she said, finally facing me. Her smile was too bright, too practiced. "I thought you had that early flight to Chicago tomorrow." "Postponed until Thursday." I studied her face, noting the slight smudge of mascara under her left eye, the way she kept touching her earring. Classic tells. "Gives us more time together." Something flickered across her expression. Annoyance, maybe, or disappointment. "Great, that's great." She headed for the stairs, moving just a little too quickly. I waited until I heard the bathroom door close, then pulled out my phone and opened the tracking app I'd installed on our shared family plan 6 months ago. Not because I was suspicious then, just practical. We both traveled for work, and knowing where the other person was had always seemed smart. The little blue dot showed her location history for the day. Her office until 3 p.m., then the Marriott downtown from 4 to 7:30. The same Marriott where she'd been 3 times in the past 2 weeks, always during what she called extended meetings. I scrolled through her recent photos, the ones that automatically backed up to our shared cloud storage. Most were work-related, conference rooms, presentation slides, the usual corporate nonsense. But there, buried between a photo of her lunch salad and a screenshot of an email, was something she'd definitely meant to delete. A bathroom mirror selfie, not of her, of a man's hand wearing a distinctive silver ring with a black stone, a ring I'd seen Hayes wearing every time we'd met at company functions. The shower was still running upstairs. I had maybe 10 minutes. I forwarded the photo to myself, then opened her text messages. Most were work-related, but there was a thread with someone listed simply as H that made my stomach clench. H. Same time Thursday? I'll book the usual room. Vara. Perfect. Porter's traveling anyway. H. Good. I hate sneaking around, but you know how messy divorces can get. Vara. Soon. I just need a few more months to get everything in order. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at that last message for a long moment. Everything in order. Our joint accounts, the house we'd bought together, the investment portfolio I'd been building for our retirement. She wasn't just having an affair, she was planning an exit strategy. The water shut off upstairs. I quickly scrolled to Hayes' wife's contact information, saved it to my phone, then deleted any trace that I'd been snooping. Lyra Ventrix Relin. I'd met her twice at company parties, both times finding her more interesting than anyone else in the room. Late 30s, elegant in a way that suggested old money, with eyes that seemed to catch every detail while revealing nothing about what she was thinking. I sent her a single text. "We need to talk. Your husband and my wife are planning more than quarterly projections." The response came back within 30 seconds. "I know. Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m., Cafe Luna on Beacon Street. Come alone." I deleted the conversation just as Vara came downstairs in her silk robe, hair wrapped in a towel. "You look thoughtful," she said, settling onto the couch beside me. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about work." I put my arm around her, noting how she stiffened slightly at the contact. "You know how it is." She leaned against me, but it felt mechanical, like she was playing a role. "I might have to work late again tomorrow. Hayes wants to review the Morrison account before the presentation." "Of course he does." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with that lingering cologne that wasn't mine. "You work so hard for him." She looked up at me, and for a moment I thought I saw something like guilt flicker across her face. But then she smiled, and the moment was gone. "Someone has to pay for your expensive hobbies," she said, gesturing toward my collection of vintage guitars mounted on the far wall. "Those guitars are investments," I said, unlike some people's expensive tastes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." I stood up, stretching. "I'm going to grab a drink. Want anything?" "I'm fine." I walked to the kitchen, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, and stared out the window at our perfectly manicured backyard. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together total, and I'd never once suspected she was capable of this level of deception. But then again, I'd never suspected she was capable of a lot of things. My phone buzzed with another text from Lyra. "Bring evidence, I'll bring mine." I smiled for the first time all evening. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. Cafe Luna was the kind of place where Boston's professional class went to conduct business they didn't want conducted in offices. Exposed brick walls, deliberately mismatched furniture, and enough ambient noise to mask conversations from curious ears. Lyra was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall, a positioning choice that told me she was just as paranoid as I was feeling. She wore a charcoal gray dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and her dark hair was pulled back in a style that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her green eyes. "Porter." She didn't stand or offer to shake hands, just gestured to the seat across from her. "You look exactly like someone whose world just shifted off its axis." "You look like someone who's been expecting this conversation for a while." 6 months. She sipped what appeared to be black coffee from a ceramic mug. "That's how long I've known about Hayes and your wife. The question is, what do you plan to do about it?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the mirror selfie I'd found. "Recognize the ring?" She glanced at it, then reached into her purse and produced a manila envelope. From it, she extracted a series of photographs: Hayes and Vara entering the Marriott, Hayes and Vara in his Tesla, Hayes and Vara at a restaurant I didn't recognize. "Professional photographer," she said. "I believe in documentation." "How long have you known?" I suspected when he started working late 3 nights a week and coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. I confirmed it when I hired a private investigator. She leaned back in the booth, studying my face. "The real question is what we're going to do about it." "We? You think this is just about infidelity?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Hayes has been systematically moving assets into offshore accounts for 8 months. Your wife has been helping him identify which of his business dealings might be scrutinized in a divorce proceeding. They're not just planning to leave us, they're planning to leave us with nothing." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "How do you know about Vara's involvement?" "Because I've been listening to his phone calls. Hayes isn't nearly as clever as he thinks he is." She slid another photograph across the table, a bank statement showing transfers of significant amounts to accounts I didn't recognize. Your wife has been providing him with information about your financial portfolio. They're using your investment strategies to hide his money. That's impossible. Vara doesn't have access to... I stopped, remembering all the times she'd asked seemingly innocent questions about my client accounts, my investment philosophy, my long-term financial planning. She's been playing a longer game than either of us realized, Lyra said. The question is whether you want revenge or whether you want to win. What's the difference? Revenge is emotional. It feels good in the moment but leaves you vulnerable to counterattack. She finished her coffee and set the mug down with deliberate precision. Winning means they lose everything while we come out ahead. It means being smarter, more patient, and more ruthless than they are. I studied her face, trying to read the calculation behind those green eyes. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership. You have skills I need. You understand security systems. You know how to gather intelligence without being detected, and you have legitimate access to information they think is secure. She paused. I have resources you need, money, connections, and a very expensive legal team that specializes in asset recovery. And what makes you think I'm interested in being ruthless? She smiled, and for the first time since I'd sat down, it looked genuine. Because you're here instead of confronting your wife directly. Because you texted me instead of Hayes. And because you're asking about strategy instead of demanding immediate satisfaction. She leaned forward slightly. You're not the kind of man who acts on impulse, Porter. You're the kind who plans. She was right, and we both knew it. I'd spent 15 years learning to think 3 moves ahead, to identify weaknesses and exploit them systematically. The only difference was that this time, the target wasn't some corporate security system or military objective. This time, it was personal. What did you have in mind? I asked. Phase 1. Gather more evidence. Document everything. The affair, the financial manipulation, every lie they've told us. Build a case that's absolutely airtight. And Phase 2? We destroy them, professionally, financially, and socially. She reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. But we do it smart, we do it legal, and we do it in a way that leaves them no room to recover. What about Phase 3? Her smile widened. Phase 3 is where we take everything they thought they were going to steal from us and we use it to build something better. I thought about Vara upstairs in our shower, washing off the scent of another man while planning to take half of everything I'd worked to build. I thought about Hayes with his expensive suits and his assumption that everyone around him was too stupid to see through his games. I'm in, I said. What do we do first? First, you go home and pretend nothing has changed. Keep documenting, keep gathering evidence, but don't let them know you're suspicious. She stood up, leaving a 20 on the table. Second, you meet me tomorrow night at the Beacon Hill Hotel bar. I want you to see something. What kind of something? The kind that's going to make you very angry, she said. And anger, properly channeled, is exactly what we're going to need. She walked away without looking back, leaving me alone with my coffee and a growing sense that I'd just committed to something that was going to change everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Vara. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I typed back, no problem. Love you. The lie came easier than I'd expected. The Beacon Hill Hotel bar was exactly the kind of place Hayes would choose for an affair. Dimly lit, expensive, and full of people who minded their own business. I arrived 15 minutes early and positioned myself at a table with a clear view of the entrance, nursing a whiskey and trying to look like just another businessman unwinding after a long day. Lyra appeared at 7:30, wearing jeans and a black sweater that made her look 10 years younger. She slid into the chair across from me without ceremony. They'll be here in 20 minutes, she said. Table by the window, already reserved under a fake name. How do you know? Because I've been tracking his patterns for 6 months, every Tuesday and Thursday, same routine. She signaled the waitress for a glass of wine. Your wife thinks you're in Chicago until tomorrow, right? That's what I told her. I'd actually canceled the trip that morning, citing a client emergency. She seemed relieved. I bet she did. We sat in silence for a few minutes, two people waiting to watch their spouses betray them in real time. It should have felt more dramatic, but mostly it just felt surreal. Can I ask you something? I said. Shoot. Why aren't you more upset about this? Lyra considered the question while sipping her wine. Who says I'm not upset? You seem very controlled. I've had 6 months to work through the emotional part, she said. Now I'm focused on the practical part. Hayes thinks he's smarter than everyone around him, but he's made one crucial mistake. Which is? He underestimated his wife. The entrance door opened, and Hayes walked in wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. He was followed by Vara, who wore the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. They were seated at the window table, just as Lyra had predicted. From our position, we could see them clearly while remaining unnoticed in the bar's dim lighting. Look at their body language, Lyra said quietly. Hayes was leaning forward, talking animatedly while Vara listened with the kind of focused attention she used to give me. When he reached across the table to touch her hand, she didn't pull away. How long have they been meeting here? I asked. Since March. Always the same table, always the same routine. Dinner, drinks, then upstairs to room 412. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of a hotel keycard. I had a copy made 3 weeks ago. How? Hayes leaves his wallet on the nightstand when he showers. Your wife is apparently very trusting of hotel security. Lyra's smile was sharp. Or maybe she just doesn't think like someone who's spent years in corporate security. I watched Hayes signal the waitress for another round, his hand resting possessively on Vara's arm. They looked comfortable together, familiar in a way that suggested this had been going on much longer than 6 months. I need to know something, I said. When this is over, when we've destroyed them both, what happens between us? What do you mean? I mean, are we partners in revenge, or are we something more? Lyra set down her wine glass and looked at me directly. That depends on whether you're asking because you're curious or because you're already thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. Good. So am I. She reached into her purse and pulled out a hotel key card. Room 418. It's directly across the hall from theirs. You want to spy on them? I want to document them. There's a difference. She stood up, leaving money on the table. The question is whether you're ready to see exactly how little your marriage has meant to your wife. I looked across the bar at Vara, who was laughing at something Hayes had said. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months, more relaxed and animated than she ever was at home. Let's go, I said. Room 418 was a standard hotel room with one significant advantage. The peephole in the door offered a clear view of the hallway, including the door to room 412. Lyra had also brought a small digital camera with a telephoto lens, the kind private investigators used for surveillance. How long do we wait? I asked. Not long. They'll finish dinner in about 30 minutes, then come straight up. She was right. At 9:15, the elevator doors opened, and Hayes and Vara stepped into the hallway. They were holding hands, talking quietly, completely oblivious to the fact that they were being watched. Hayes fumbled with the key card while Vara stood close enough to kiss him. When the door finally opened, she pulled him inside with a laugh that I could hear through the thin hotel walls. Got it, Lyra said, reviewing the photos on her camera. Clear shots of both their faces, the room number, the timestamp, enough to establish a pattern. Now what? Now we wait for them to leave, and then we implement phase 2. Which is? We make sure everyone they care about knows exactly what kind of people they really are. She connected her camera to a laptop and began uploading the photos to a secure cloud storage account. While she worked, I found myself studying her profile in the dim light from the laptop screen. "Can I ask you something else?" I said. "Sure." "What did you see in Hayes originally?" "Security," she said, without looking up from the laptop. "My first husband left me with nothing but debt and a law degree I'd never used. Hayes represented stability, success, a chance to build something lasting." She paused. "What did you see in Vara?" "Ambition, intelligence, someone who seemed to want the same things I wanted." "And what did you want?" "A partnership, someone who would challenge me, support me, build something together." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out we were both building something, just not together. "The difference," Lyra said, "is that we learned from our mistakes. They're about to repeat theirs." Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. "Hayes just told me he's working late at the office. Emergency client meeting. Vara texted me an hour ago. Same story, different client." "Perfect. That gives us time to visit their real office." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Hayes keeps a second laptop in his home study, one he thinks I don't know about. And I'm willing to bet your wife has been using your home computer to research things she shouldn't be researching." "You want to break into our houses?" "I want to gather evidence from property we legally have access to," Lyra said. "There's a difference." She was right, technically. As Hayes's wife, she had every right to access his home office. And as Vara's husband, I had every right to check our shared computer. "What are we looking for?" "Financial records, communication logs, evidence of the asset transfers I mentioned yesterday." She closed the laptop and packed up the camera. "And anything else that proves they've been planning this for longer than we thought." "And if we find it?" "Then tomorrow, we start burning their world down." Hayes and Lyra's house was a monument to expensive taste and emotional emptiness. Everything was perfectly arranged, from the imported marble in the foyer to the abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. It felt like a museum where someone happened to sleep. "His office is upstairs," Lyra said, leading me through rooms that looked like they'd been designed for magazine photo shoots rather than actual living. "He thinks I don't know about the safe behind the bookshelf." "How long have you known?" "About the safe? 2 years. About what's in it? 3 weeks. The office was exactly what I'd expected from Hayes. Massive mahogany desk, leather chairs that cost more than my first motorcycle, and enough technology to run a small corporation. But it was the wall of family photos that caught my attention. Hayes with various politicians, Hayes at charity galas, Hayes receiving awards from organizations I'd never heard of. Not a single photo included Lyra. "Charming, isn't it?" she said, noticing my attention. 10 years of marriage, and I'm apparently not worth documenting." She moved to the bookshelf and pulled out a leather-bound volume that turned out to be hollow. Behind it was a small digital safe. "The combination is our wedding anniversary," she said, inputting the numbers. "He's not as clever as he thinks." The safe contained 2 laptops, several manila folders, and a small velvet box that Lyra ignored completely. She handed me one of the laptops while taking the other for herself. "Look for anything involving offshore accounts, property transfers, or communication with your wife," she said. Hayes's laptop was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Email threads with financial advisors in the Cayman Islands, property deeds for a house in Costa Rica I was certain Lyra didn't know about, and most damning of all, a folder labeled Exit Strategy that contained detailed plans for liquidating assets and disappearing. But it was the subfolder labeled Vara Research that made my hands shake. She'd been providing him with information about my client list, my investment strategies, and my personal financial planning for over a year. Every conversation we'd had about money, every decision I'd shared with her about our future, had been passed along to Hayes like intelligence reports. "Find something interesting?" Lyra asked. I showed her the screen. She read for a few minutes, her expression growing colder with each document. Your wife is more thorough than I gave her credit for, she said finally. She's been building a complete profile of your financial life. For what purpose? Best guess? Hayes plans to use your investment strategies for his own portfolio while simultaneously destroying your client relationships. She pointed to a document that detailed my security consulting contracts. Look at this. He's been researching ways to undermine your professional reputation. That's not just adultery, I said. That's economic warfare. Now you're starting to understand what we're really dealing with. She moved to Hayes's desktop computer and began accessing files that weren't on the laptop. What we found there was even worse. Hayes had been systematically documenting our marriages, looking for weaknesses to exploit. He had psychological profiles of both Lyra and me, detailed financial records going back 5 years, and what appeared to be a timeline for destroying our lives while building new ones with our stolen assets. Look at this, Lyra said, pointing to a document titled Lyra Contingencies. It was a plan for having her committed to a psychiatric facility if she became problematic during the divorce proceedings. Complete with forged medical records and testimony from doctors, Hayes had apparently already paid off. He's been planning to have you declared mentally incompetent, I said, and look what he has planned for you. The Porter Contingencies file was equally chilling. Hayes had been researching ways to destroy my security consulting business, including plans to spread rumors about my military service and my professional competence. He'd even contacted several of my clients with concerns about my stability. How is this legal? I asked. It's not, Lyra said. But Hayes has always believed that legality is a matter of having better lawyers than the other guy. What about this? I pointed to a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were life insurance policies on both Lyra and me, taken out within the past 6 months. The beneficiaries were listed as Hayes and Vara, respectively. Well, Lyra said after a long moment, that's certainly ambitious of them. We need to copy all of this. Already on it. She was uploading files to a secure cloud storage account. But we need to be smart about how we use it. If we reveal everything at once, they'll know we've been in Hayes's office. What do you suggest? We feed it to them slowly. Let them think they're still in control while we systematically destroy their plans. She finished the upload and began returning everything to its original position. And we make sure we have backup plans for their backup plans. Meaning we assume they have contingencies for getting caught, and we prepare contingencies for their contingencies. As we prepared to leave, Lyra paused at the velvet box in the safe. Aren't you curious? I asked. I know what it is. Hayes's grandmother's engagement ring. The one he promised to give me someday. She closed the safe without touching the box. Apparently, someday never came. We drove to my house in silence, both processing what we'd discovered. The scale of Hayes and Vara's deception was larger than either of us had imagined. This wasn't just an affair. It was a comprehensive plan to destroy our lives and steal our assets. My house felt different when we walked in. Knowing what I now knew about Vara's betrayal, every room seemed to contain evidence of her deception. The expensive art she'd insisted we buy, the furniture she'd chosen, even the wine she kept in our cellar. All of it suddenly felt like props in an elaborate performance. Where's your computer? Lyra asked. Home office? Second floor? Vara's research was less sophisticated than Hayes's, but no less thorough. She'd been documenting my daily routines, my professional relationships, and my personal habits with the precision of a surveillance operation. But it was her browser history that revealed the true scope of her planning. She'd been researching divorce lawyers for 8 months, specifically looking for attorneys who specialized in high-asset dissolution and spousal financial misconduct. She'd also been researching my military background, apparently looking for anything that could be used to question my mental stability. Look at this, Lyra said, pointing to a bookmarked web page. It was an article about PTSD and military veterans, with several passages highlighted in yellow. In the margins, Vara had written notes about my sleeping patterns, my reaction to loud noises, and my preference for sitting with my back to walls in restaurants. "She's been building a case to have you declared unfit," Lyra said. "Just like Hayes with you. Except your wife is better at this than my husband. Her documentation is more detailed, more personal." I scrolled through months of research, feeling sick as I realized how thoroughly Vara had been studying me like a specimen. Every intimate detail of our marriage had been catalogued and weaponized. "There's something else," Lyra said. She was looking at Vara's email, which was still logged in on the computer. The email thread between Vara and Hayes went back 14 months, far longer than either of us had suspected. But it wasn't the affair that shocked me. It was the tone. These weren't the messages of two people falling in love. They were the communications of two people planning a business venture. Cold, calculating, focused entirely on logistics and profit margins. "They don't love each other," I said. "No, they don't even like each other very much." Lyra scrolled through message after message of complaints, criticisms, and barely concealed contempt. "This is a partnership of convenience," which makes it worse, somehow. Or better, depending on how you look at it. She turned to face me. "People in love do stupid things for each other. People in business partnerships abandon each other the moment things get difficult. You want to drive a wedge between them. I want to make them destroy each other while we watch from a safe distance." She was right. If Hayes and Vara were only together for mutual benefit, then all we had to do was make the partnership unprofitable for one of them. "How?" I asked. "We make Hayes think Vara is planning to betray him, and we make Vara think Hayes is planning to betray her." Lyra smiled, and for the first time since this had started, she looked genuinely happy. "Then we sit back and watch them tear each other apart. And after they're destroyed? After they're destroyed, we take everything they thought they were going to steal from us, and we build something better." She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that was nothing like the heavy cologne Hayes wore. "Something like what?" I asked. "Something honest," she said. "Something real." When she kissed me, it felt like the first honest thing that had happened in months. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would use Hayes and Vara's own paranoia and greed against them, feeding each of them carefully crafted information designed to make them suspicious of their partner. Lyra had suggested we start with Hayes, who she described as fundamentally insecure despite all the posturing. The approach would be subtle, plant seeds of doubt, and let his natural narcissism do the rest. "Hayes can't stand the thought of being outsmarted," she explained as we sat in her car outside his office building, "especially by someone he considers intellectually inferior." He considers Vara intellectually inferior? Hayes considers everyone intellectually inferior, but Vara especially, because she's younger and because she's a woman. Lyra checked her watch. "He should be coming out for lunch in about 10 minutes. "And you're sure this will work?" "I've been married to him for 10 years. I know exactly which buttons to push." Hayes emerged from the building at 12:30, walking with the kind of confident stride that suggested he owned everything he could see. He was talking on his phone, gesturing animatedly at someone who couldn't see him. Lyra intercepted him at the corner, appearing to bump into him accidentally while juggling coffee cups and shopping bags. "Oh, Hayes, I'm so sorry." She made a show of checking her bags for damage, while Hayes steadied her with obvious irritation. "Lyra, what are you doing downtown?" "Shopping for your birthday present, actually." She smiled the kind of smile that suggested shared secrets. "I was hoping to surprise you." "My birthday isn't for 3 months." "I know, but I saw something perfect, and I didn't want to wait." She leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to make him strain to hear. "Actually, I'm glad I ran into you. I've been meaning to ask about your new business partner. What business partner? Vara, of course. I saw the incorporation papers on your desk last week. Lyra's expression was perfectly innocent. Kellor Consulting Services? I thought it was sweet that you were helping her start her own company. I watched Hayes's face change as he processed this information. There was no company called Kellor Consulting Services, but he didn't know that. What he knew was that Vara had apparently been planning something without telling him. We haven't finalized those plans yet, he said carefully. Oh, I hope I didn't spoil the surprise. She seemed so excited when she called to confirm the paperwork details. Lyra touched his arm lightly. I just think it's wonderful that you're helping her become independent. Not many men would be secure enough to support their partner's ambitions like that. Right, of course. Anyway, I should let you get to lunch. I know how busy you are. She started to walk away, then turned back as if she'd just remembered something. Oh, and Hayes? When you see Vara, could you ask her to call me? I have some questions about the Costa Rica property transfer. Just boring legal stuff. She walked away without giving him a chance to respond, leaving Hayes standing on the sidewalk with an expression that suggested his world had just shifted in ways he didn't understand. Phase 1 complete, she said when she got back to the car. Now we wait for him to contact Vara and demand explanations for things that don't exist. How long? Knowing Hayes? About 30 minutes. She was wrong. It took 23 minutes. My phone buzzed with a text from Vara. Need to talk tonight. Something important. Hook, line, and sinker, Lyra said when I showed her the message. Phase 2 involved planting similar doubts in Vara's mind about Hayes's loyalty. For this, we needed a more direct approach. I called Vara back and suggested we meet for dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. Somewhere public, somewhere that would make her feel safe while I systematically destroyed her confidence in her partner. You seem tense, I said after we'd ordered. Everything okay at work? Fine. Just the usual corporate nonsense. Hayes still pushing those quarterly projections? Among other things. She was picking at her salad, not really eating. Porter, can I ask you something? Shoot. If you were planning a major business venture, something that could change your whole life, would you tell me about it? Of course. Why? Just wondering about trust in relationships. Whether people should share everything or keep some things private. Depends on the thing, I guess. Financial decisions, career changes, anything that affects both partners, that should definitely be shared. I leaned forward slightly. Are you thinking about making some kind of change? Maybe. I've been offered an opportunity, but I'm not sure if it's legitimate. What kind of opportunity? A consulting position. Significant money, but it would require relocating. Where? Costa Rica. I let my expression show just enough surprise to seem natural. That's pretty far from Boston. I know, and the timing is complicated. Because of Hayes? She looked up sharply. What do you mean? Well, if you're leaving the company, presumably he'd need to find someone to replace you. That could affect his quarterly numbers. I paused. Unless he's planning to leave too. Why would you think that? Just seems like a coincidence. You getting offered a position in Costa Rica right around the time Hayes has been talking about expanding internationally. Hayes has been talking about international expansion. At the company party last month, he mentioned something about Central American markets, tax advantages, that kind of thing. I shrugged. I assumed you knew about his plans. He hasn't mentioned anything to me. Probably just preliminary research. You know how executives are, always exploring options. But I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. If Hayes was researching Costa Rica without telling her, what else might he be planning without her knowledge? Vara, can I ask you something? Sure. This consulting opportunity, is it something you applied for or did they approach you? They approached me. How did they get your name? She was quiet for a long moment. I'm not sure. Might be worth finding out. Make sure it's legitimate before you make any major decisions. Right, of course. I paid for dinner and drove her home, letting her process the implications of what I'd told her. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I could practically see the paranoia taking root. I might need to work late tomorrow, she said as we walked to the front door. Hayes wants to review some international market research. No problem. I'll probably be working late too. But instead of working late, I would be with Lyra, monitoring the communications between Hayes and Vara as they confronted each other about plans that didn't exist and betrayals that were entirely fictional. How long before they start turning on each other? I asked Lyra later that night. Not long. Hayes is probably already going through Vara's desk, looking for evidence of this consulting company. And Vara is probably researching Costa Rica properties, trying to figure out what Hayes has been hiding from her. And when they don't find anything, they'll assume the other person is better at hiding things than they thought, which will make them even more paranoid. What's our next move? We wait for them to make the first mistake, and then we make sure it's their last mistake. She was right. Within 48 hours, Hayes and Vara's partnership would begin to collapse under the weight of their own suspicions. And when it did, Lyra and I would be ready to take everything they'd tried to steal from us. The game was just beginning. The first crack appeared on Thursday morning. I was in my home office, pretending to work while actually monitoring the email account Lyra had set up to track Hayes and Vara's communications, when my phone rang. Porter? Vara's voice was tight with stress. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course. Have you been talking to anyone about our finances, our investment portfolio, our long-term plans, anything like that? Just you. Why? Someone's been asking questions about us, about our assets, our business relationships. She paused. I think Hayes might be investigating us. Investigating us for what? I don't know. But he's been asking strange questions, wanting to see documentation for things that should be private. What kind of documentation? Bank statements, investment records, your client list? Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Porter, I think he might be planning something. What do you mean? I found research on his computer. About you, about your military service, about our marriage. He's been building some kind of file. I let my voice trail off, as if I was processing something disturbing. Vara, there's something I need to tell you. What? I've been getting calls, potential clients asking strange questions about my background, my reliability. Someone's been spreading rumors about my business. What kind of rumors? That I'm unstable, that my military service left me with psychological problems that affect my judgment. I paused for effect. The calls started about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago was when Hayes started asking about your client list. You think he's trying to destroy my business? I don't know what to think anymore. Vara, listen to me. If Hayes is planning something, you need to be very careful. Document everything. Keep records of all your communications with him. I already started. But Porter, there's something else. What? I think he's been lying to me about the Costa Rica property. I did some research and the address he gave me doesn't exist. Are you sure? I had a real estate agent in San Jose check it out. There's no property registered at that address, and there never has been. So where has he been sending the money? That's what I'm trying to figure out. After she hung up, I called Lyra immediately. Phase 3 is ahead of schedule, I told her. Vara thinks Hayes is investigating us, and she's starting to question the Costa Rica story. Perfect. Hayes called me an hour ago, convinced that Vara has been stealing money from their joint account to fund this fictional consulting company. Has she been stealing money? Of course not, but Hayes found some transactions he can't account for, and instead of asking me about them, their purchases I made for his birthday present, he's decided Vara must be embezzling. How long before they confront each other directly? Not long. Hayes scheduled a meeting with Vara for this afternoon. He thinks he's going to catch her in a lie. And Vara thinks she's going to catch him in a lie. Which means they're both going to walk into that meeting convinced the other person is betraying them. What happens when they realize neither of them is guilty of what they're accusing the other of? They'll start looking for who's really responsible, which is why we need to be ready for Phase 4. Which is? Complete destruction. By tonight, Hayes and Vara won't just suspect each other. They'll hate each other. And when people hate each other, they do stupid things. What kind of stupid things? The kind that destroy their lives while leaving us completely clean. The meeting between Hayes and Vara took place at 3 p.m. in Hayes's office. Lyra had positioned herself in the coffee shop across the street with a telephoto lens, while I monitored their communications from my car in the parking garage. The confrontation lasted 47 minutes. Even from a distance, we could see the anger escalating. Hayes was gesturing aggressively, Vara was standing with her arms crossed, and both of them were clearly shouting. My phone buzzed with a text from Vara. It's over. Coming home. Lyra's phone buzzed at the same time. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. They've officially turned on each other, Lyra said when she called me. Hayes just stormed out of the building and Vara left through the back entrance. Now what? Now we let them destroy each other while we prepare for the aftermath. Vara came home that evening looking like she'd been through a war. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was smudged, and she had the shell-shocked expression of someone whose world had just collapsed. What happened? I asked, playing the concerned husband. Hayes and I had a disagreement about the direction of the project we've been working on. Must have been some disagreement. He accused me of stealing money and planning to leave the company without notice. She sat down heavily on the couch. I accused him of investigating you and trying to destroy your business. What did he say to that? He said he was protecting his interests, that he had reason to believe you might be a security risk. A security risk? Something about your military background, your access to sensitive corporate information. She looked up at me with something that might have been genuine concern. Porter, I think Hayes might be planning to have you investigated by federal authorities. On what grounds? I don't know. But he mentioned something about defense contractors and security clearances. This was interesting. Hayes was apparently more paranoid than we'd given him credit for, and he was escalating beyond what we'd anticipated. What are you going to do about work? I asked. I don't know. Hayes made it clear that he doesn't trust me anymore, and I certainly don't trust him. Maybe it's time to consider that consulting opportunity. What consulting opportunity? I stared at her for a moment, genuinely confused. The one in Costa Rica. You mentioned it at dinner the other night. Porter, I never mentioned any consulting opportunity. I've never been offered a position in Costa Rica. But you said... I said Hayes had been talking about Costa Rica, but I never said anything about a job offer. We looked at each other in silence, both realizing that someone had been manipulating both of us. The question was who and why. Vara, I said slowly, I think we need to talk. About what? About the fact that someone has been playing us against each other. Someone who knows both of us well enough to predict how we'd react to certain information. You think someone set this up? I think someone wanted Hayes and you to turn on each other, and they used us to make it happen. Her face went pale as she processed the implications. Lyra. What about Lyra? She's the only person who knows both Hayes and me well enough to manipulate us like this, and she's the only person who would benefit from destroying our partnership. What partnership? Vara looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her making a decision about how much truth to tell me. Hayes and I have been working together on a project, a business venture that could be very profitable for both of us. What kind of business venture? The kind that requires discretion and careful planning. Vara, what have you been doing? She took a deep breath. We've been developing a strategy for acquiring undervalued companies and restructuring them for maximum profit. It's completely legal, but it requires access to information that most people don't have. What kind of information? Security assessments, financial vulnerabilities, internal corporate structures? She looked at me directly. The kind of information that someone with your background and client relationships could provide. You've been using me. We've been building a partnership that would benefit all of us. Hayes has the capital, I have the corporate connections, and you have the security expertise. And you were planning to tell me about this when? When we were ready to make you a formal offer. But now Hayes thinks you're betraying him, and you think he's investigating me. And someone, probably Lyra, has been feeding us information designed to make us suspicious of each other. I sat back, trying to process this new version of events. If Vara was telling the truth, then Hayes and she weren't planning to destroy our marriages and steal our assets. They were planning to include us in a business venture that could be profitable for everyone. But that didn't explain the offshore accounts, the property in Costa Rica, or the insurance policies we'd found in Hayes's safe. Vara, I said, there are some things you don't know about Hayes. Things that suggest his plans might be more complicated than you realize. What kind of things? The kind that suggest he's been planning to disappear with a lot of money, and he's been planning to leave you behind when he does. I told her about the evidence Lyra and I had found, watching her face change as she realized the scope of Hayes's deception. He's been planning to abandon me, she said finally. It looks that way. And Lyra has been manipulating both of us to make sure his plans fail. Which means we've been fighting the wrong enemy. Vara stood up and walked to the window, staring out at our perfectly manicured suburban street. What do we do now? She asked. Now we decide whether we're going to keep fighting each other or whether we're going to work together to stop the people who have been manipulating us. You want to partner with me against Hayes and Lyra? I want to make sure that when this is over, we're the ones left standing. She turned back to face me, and for the first time in months, she looked like the woman I'd married. What did you have in mind? I had in mind that we remind Hayes and Lyra that they're not the only ones who know how to play games. And how do we do that? I smiled. We use their own strategy against them. We make them think they're winning, right up until the moment we take everything. Everything? Everything! The game was about to change completely, and this time, Vara and I were going to be on the same side. The next morning, Vara and I sat at our kitchen table with laptops, legal pads, and enough coffee to fuel a small corporation. We'd spent most of the night planning our counterattack against Hayes and Lyra, and the strategy we'd developed was ambitious enough to either save our marriage or destroy us both. Let me make sure I understand this, Vara said, reviewing the timeline we'd sketched out. We're going to pretend to divorce each other, pretend to hate each other, and pretend to be vulnerable to manipulation by Hayes and Lyra, respectively, while secretly working together to gather evidence of their actual crimes, I added, and positioning ourselves to take control of Hayes's offshore assets. This is either brilliant or insane. Probably both. The plan relied on several key assumptions. First, that Hayes and Lyra were working together to destroy our marriages and steal our assets. Second, that they would try to recruit us as allies against each other once they believed we were divorced. Third, that their greed would make them careless about covering their tracks. What if we're wrong about them working together? Vara asked. Then we're about to make some very embarrassing mistakes, I said. But if we're right, we're about to turn the tables completely. And if this works? If this works, Hayes and Lyra will end up in prison, and we'll end up with enough evidence to recover everything they've stolen plus damages for emotional distress. And our marriage? I looked at her across the table, noting the way the morning light highlighted the intelligence in her eyes. That depends on whether we can learn to trust each other again. I want to try. So do I. The first phase of our counterattack required selling our fake divorce to Hayes and Lyra separately. Vara would approach Hayes as the wronged wife seeking revenge against her controlling husband. I would approach Lyra as the betrayed husband looking for justice against his manipulative wife. The key is making them think they're recruiting us, Vara said. They have to believe they're gaining allies, not creating enemies. Which means we have to be convincing about hating each other. How convincing? Convincing enough that they'll want to help us destroy each other. We started with a very public argument at the grocery store, complete with raised voices, accusations of financial irresponsibility, and a dramatic exit that left Vara in tears and me looking like an insensitive bastard. 3 of our neighbors witnessed the performance, ensuring that word would spread quickly through our social circle. Next, I moved into a hotel room and began making calls to divorce attorneys, making sure to sound bitter and vindictive about Vara's betrayal of our marriage. Meanwhile, Vara started showing up to work looking devastated, dropping hints to her colleagues about my controlling behavior and psychological problems. Within 48 hours, both Hayes and Lyra had reached out to offer support. Hayes called Vara first. "I heard about you and Porter. I'm sorry. I know how difficult this must be." "It's been horrible," Vara said, following the script we'd rehearsed. "I never realized how much he resented my success, my independence. He's been sabotaging my career for months." "That's terrible. Is there anything I can do to help?" "Actually, there is. I know we've had our disagreements lately, but I could really use a friend right now. Someone who understands the pressure of building a career." "Of course. Let's have dinner tonight. I know a place where we can talk privately." Lyra's approach was more subtle. She showed up at my hotel bar unannounced, looking elegant and sympathetic. "I heard about you and Vara," she said, sitting down without invitation. "Hayes mentioned that she's been having some kind of breakdown." "Breakdown?" "Paranoid delusions, accusations about business partnerships that don't exist, claims that he's been investigating you." Lyra signaled the bartender for wine. "Hayes is concerned about her mental state." "She has been acting strange lately," I said, playing along. "Secretive, defensive, making accusations that don't make sense." "It must be very difficult for you. The worst part is feeling like I never really knew her, like our entire marriage was built on lies." "I understand completely. Hayes and I have been having similar problems." "Really?" "He's been hiding things from me, making financial decisions without consultation, planning for a future that apparently doesn't include me." She sipped her wine thoughtfully. "I think we may have more in common than we realized." "What do you mean?" "I mean that we've both been betrayed by people we trusted, and betrayal, properly handled, can be an opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" "The kind that leaves us better off than we were before." Over the next week, Hayes and Lyra began recruiting Vara and me respectively for what they believed were separate revenge plots against each other. Hayes wanted Vara's help accessing my client information and financial records. Lyra wanted my help gathering evidence of Hayes's offshore accounts and property transfers. What they didn't realize was that Vara and I were sharing everything, building a comprehensive picture of their actual criminal conspiracy. The evidence was damning. Hayes had been systematically embezzling from his company for 2 years, using his position as CEO to authorize transfers to shell companies he controlled. Lyra had been helping him launder the money through real estate investments and offshore accounts. But the most shocking discovery was that they'd been planning to frame Vara and me for the embezzlement. The evidence they'd been gathering about our finances and business relationships wasn't for divorce proceedings. It was to create a paper trail that would make us look like willing participants in Hayes's crimes. "They're not just trying to steal our assets," Vara said as we reviewed the latest batch of evidence. "They're trying to set us up as scapegoats for their own crimes. Which means we need to be very careful about how we proceed. If we move too fast, they'll activate their frame-up plan. And if we move too slowly, they'll complete their theft and disappear. So we need to time this perfectly. The opportunity came when Hayes suggested that Vara help him transfer a large sum of money to what he claimed was a secure account that would be protected from Porter's vindictive lawyers. He wants me to use my access to your business accounts, Vara told me. He thinks I can transfer money without you noticing. Can you? Not legally, but I can make it look like I'm trying to, while actually documenting his requests for evidence. And I can do the same thing with Lyra. She wants me to help her access Hayes's account so she can protect her assets from his reckless spending. They're asking us to commit crimes for them, which gives us everything we need to destroy them. The final phase of our plan required careful coordination. We would pretend to help Hayes and Lyra with their respective schemes while actually gathering evidence of their criminal conspiracy. Then, at the moment they thought they'd succeeded, we would reveal that we'd been working together all along. What if they realize what we're doing before we're ready? Vara asked. Then we activate our backup plan. Which is? We disappear with their money and let them explain to the authorities why their assets are suddenly missing. That's illegal. So is embezzlement and conspiracy to commit fraud. The difference is that our crime would be stealing from criminals, while their crimes involve stealing from legitimate businesses and innocent people. You're talking about becoming criminals ourselves. I'm talking about making sure that when this is over, justice is served one way or another. Vara was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications of what we were planning. If we do this, she said finally, there's no going back. We'll either succeed completely or we'll lose everything. We've already lost everything, I said. Our marriage, our trust, our financial security, Hayes and Lyra have taken all of that already. The question is whether we're going to let them keep it. And if we succeed, we'll have our lives back, and we'll have each other. Do you really think we can trust each other again? I think we're about to find out. The next morning, we put our plan into motion. Within 72 hours, we would either be free of Hayes and Lyra forever, or we would be facing criminal charges alongside them. But for the first time in months, Vara and I were working toward the same goal, and that felt like a victory in itself. The meeting was set for Friday night at Hayes's office building. Lyra had convinced me that this was our best opportunity to access Hayes's computer systems and transfer his offshore assets to accounts she controlled. Meanwhile, Hayes had convinced Vara that this was the perfect time to frame me for embezzlement by using my business credentials to authorize fraudulent transfers. What neither of them knew was that Vara and I had spent the week preparing a trap that would expose their entire conspiracy. Remember, Vara said as we reviewed our plan one final time, we need them to incriminate themselves completely before we reveal that we've been working together. And we need to make sure we have everything documented, I added, checking the recording equipment we'd hidden throughout Hayes's office. One mistake, and they'll find a way to blame everything on us. Are you ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. We arrived at the building separately, maintaining the pretense that we were still enemies working with Hayes and Lyra against each other. The office was empty, except for security, which Hayes had arranged to bypass using his executive access. Hayes was waiting in his office when Vara arrived, looking confident and predatory. I'm glad you decided to go through with this, he said, gesturing for her to sit at his computer. After tonight, Porter won't be able to touch any of your assets. And you're sure this will work? Absolutely. We'll transfer the money to a secure account, then create a paper trail showing that Porter authorized the transfers himself. When the authorities investigate, they'll find evidence that he's been embezzling from his own clients. What happens to Porter? Prison, most likely. Financial crimes are taken very seriously, especially when they involve national security contractors. Vara sat down at the computer, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Hayes, Can I ask you something? Of course. What happens to us after this? After Porter is gone and the money is secure? We'll be free to build the life we've been planning. Costa Rica, the consulting business, everything we've talked about. And Lyra? Lyra will be dealt with. She's become a liability. What do you mean, dealt with? She's been asking too many questions, getting too close to discovering our plans. After tonight, she'll have an unfortunate accident. Vara's hands froze over the keyboard. You're planning to hurt her? I'm planning to eliminate a problem, just like we're eliminating Porter. Meanwhile, in the conference room down the hall, Lyra was explaining a similar plan to me. Hayes has no idea that I've been monitoring his communications, she said, pulling up financial records on her laptop. He thinks he's been clever, but I've been documenting everything for months. What's the end game? We transfer all of his assets to accounts I control, then we frame him and Vara for the embezzlement. They'll go to prison, and we'll be free to start over with their money. What about the Costa Rica property? There is no Costa Rica property. That was a fiction I created to make Hayes think he had an escape plan. The money he's been sending to Costa Rica has actually been going into accounts I control. You've been stealing from him? I've been recovering assets that he stole from his company. The difference is that I'm going to use the money for something worthwhile. Like what? Like building a life with someone who appreciates intelligence and planning. She moved closer, her hand resting on my arm. Someone like you. And Vara? Vara will have a tragic accident after she's served her purpose. Hayes is planning to eliminate her anyway. I'm just going to make sure it happens at the right time. You're talking about hurting people. I'm talking about removing obstacles. Hayes and Vara are criminals, Porter. They've been planning to destroy us and steal everything we've worked for. I'm simply ensuring that justice is served. In Hayes's office, Vara was stalling, pretending to have trouble accessing my business accounts. The security protocols are more complex than I expected, she said. It's going to take more time to bypass them. How much more time? Maybe another hour. Hayes checked his watch impatiently. Fine, but we need to finish this tonight. I have a meeting with some investors tomorrow, and I need to know that our assets are secure. What investors? People who are interested in our consulting venture. They're providing additional capital in exchange for a percentage of our profits. How much additional capital? $50 million. Vara tried not to react to this information. Hayes wasn't just embezzling from his current company. He was planning to defraud new investors as well. Hayes, she said carefully, are these legitimate investors? They're people who understand the value of discretion and the importance of offshore financial structures. You're talking about laundering money. I'm talking about maximizing profit while minimizing legal exposure. That's money laundering. That's business, Vara. And after tonight, you'll be a full partner in that business. In the conference room, I was having a similar conversation with Lyra. The beauty of this plan, she was saying, is that we'll have enough money to disappear completely. New identities, new lives, no connection to Hayes or Vara or any of this mess. You're talking about running away. I'm talking about starting over, with you if you're interested. And if I'm not interested, then you'll have an unfortunate accident, just like Vara and Hayes. You're threatening me? I'm explaining your options. You can be part of the solution, or you can be part of the problem. But either way, this ends tonight. She pulled a small pistol from her purse, setting it on the table between us. I really hope you choose to be part of the solution, Porter. I've grown quite fond of you. This was the moment Vara and I had been preparing for. Both Hayes and Lyra had revealed their plans to commit multiple felonies, including embezzlement, fraud, and what sounded very much like premeditated harm to witnesses. I activated the silent alarm on my phone, sending a signal to Vara that it was time to execute our plan. Lyra, I said, there's something I need to tell you. What? I've been recording this entire conversation. Her face went pale. That's impossible. And Vara has been recording her conversation with Hayes. You're lying. And the FBI has been monitoring both conversations through equipment we installed earlier this week. That's not possible. You and Vara hate each other. Actually, we've been working together since the night we discovered your conspiracy. Everything you've seen, the divorce, the arguments, the mutual hatred, has been an act designed to make you and Hayes reveal your true plans. Lyra reached for the pistol, but I was faster. Years of military training had taught me to anticipate and counter threats, and I had the weapon secured before she could touch it. It's over, Lyra. In Hayes's office, Vara was having a similar conversation. Hayes, she said, standing up from the computer, I need you to know that I've been recording everything you've said tonight. What are you talking about? The embezzlement, the money laundering, the plans to harm Porter and Lyra, all of it has been documented. You're working with Porter? I've been working with Porter since we discovered your conspiracy. Our divorce was fake, Hayes. We've been gathering evidence against you and Lyra for weeks. Hayes lunged toward her, but Vara had positioned herself near the door. She was out of the office and running toward the conference room before he could react. Porter, she shouted as she ran down the hall. Now. I activated the second signal, and within minutes, the building was surrounded by FBI agents who had been waiting for our call. Hayes and Lyra were arrested on charges of embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit bodily harm. The evidence we'd gathered, combined with the recordings from that night, provided prosecutors with everything they needed for conviction. But the most satisfying moment came when Hayes and Lyra realized that they'd been outplayed by the people they'd considered easy targets. You can't do this to us, Lyra said, as the agents led her away in handcuffs. Actually, Vara said, we just did. This isn't over, Hayes shouted. We'll find a way to make you pay for this. No, I said. It is over. And the only people who are going to pay are the people who deserve to pay. As we watched Hayes and Lyra being driven away in separate FBI vehicles, Vara and I stood together in the empty parking lot, processing what we'd just accomplished. Is it really over? She asked. The criminal case is just beginning, but our part is finished. What happens now? Now we go home and figure out how to rebuild our marriage. Do you think we can? I think we just proved that we make a pretty good team when we're working toward the same goal. She smiled, and for the first time in months, it looked completely genuine. So, what's our next goal? Learning to trust each other again. That might be harder than catching criminals. Probably, but I think it's worth the effort. We walked back to our car together, leaving behind the wreckage of Hayes and Lyra's conspiracy and the beginning of whatever came next for us. It wasn't going to be easy. We had months of lies and betrayal to work through, trust to rebuild, and a relationship to reconstruct from the ground up. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I believed we had a chance. And sometimes, a chance is all you need.